Chinese Kung Fu doesn't refer to just one, but several thousand styles. Wing Chun is one of the younger Kung Fu styles in the world, and is different from what we think of as traditional Kung Fu. The name Wing Chun translates to eternal spring, and just like a spring, the practitioner should be calm and relaxed. He should be like water, a balance between softness and strength. The exact origin of Wing Chun Kung Fu is still a mystery, but what most Kung Fu historians agree on is that Wing Chun was developed in China around the 1600s at the start of the Manchu dynasty.
Well, it evolved from the previous Shaolin Kung Fus. More than likely it came about as they went underground against the Manchu dynasty. They needed a system that would train fighters quicker versus having to spend 10, 15 years training somebody. You could get an efficient fighter trained in just a few years.
Nevertheless, the most popular origin story that's told in all Wing Chun circles is that a woman by the name of Nemoy, who was one of the Shaolin monks that opposed the Manchu dynasty, is the one who created it. After the Manchus attacked and burnt down her monastery, she fled to the mountains in hiding, and it is here that she began to develop a new system that was designed to use soft style to overcome hard styles. Years later, she would pass this system on to a much younger woman to help her get out of an arranged marriage that she was trapped in.
Wing Chun was invented by a Buddhist nun by the name of Mai. She later passed that on to a local girl. Her name is Yim Wing Chun, and that is where the system takes its name from. And since then, it's been passed down through different lineages onto us.
One of the nuns who fled the monastery and kind of took this young lady under her wing and helped her learn to fight so she could get out of a arranged marriage.
It was so that Yim Wing Chun could fight off a suitor she didn't want to marry, because she had made the boast that if she could beat him in a fight, she wouldn't have to marry him. But whether or not that's true, I couldn't say.
Whether Wing Chun was developed by a woman or a group of monks may never be solved, but what is for sure is that after its creation, Wing Chun was taught in secret, mostly kept within a family or a small group of students, never exceeding more than 3 or 4 people. Until 300 years later, a Wing Chun practitioner, Grandmaster Yip, would break that cycle and teach several students. The majority of Wing Chun circles trace their lineages back to Grandmaster Yip.
Grandmaster Yip, he was a police officer in the Hong Kong force, but he originally lived in mainland China, later moved on to Hong Kong, where he started to train. He taught on the second floor of a restaurant. It was basically, he rented the roof. During the time, it was around the wartime, so a lot of people were poor around that age. So he didn't have a whole lot of money, so he started to teach the system that he had learned. And from there, he started to gain more and more students, and the system started to grow, and he became more and more popular.
Without a doubt, Grandmaster Yip's most famous student, and the one who first brought Wing Chun to America, was Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee had been a student under the Grandmaster's instruction for 5 years, and was the first to break the traditional cycle of keeping Wing Chun between Chinese. Bruce Lee would use Wing Chun in his films, and was also the basis of forming his own Kung Fu system, Jeet Kune Do.
Well, the first, probably the most famous introduction was obviously his student Bruce Lee. So he brought it over, I guess that would have been the 50s and 60s was when it started. It really took off late 60s, early 70s as he achieved, some notoriety on American television and then in Hong Kong cinema.
Under Grandmaster Yip, one of his best well-known students was Li Junfan, or Bruce Lee. So Bruce Lee trained under him. He learned most of the martial art. He didn't quite finish the system, so to speak, but he is well known for that, learning different martial arts as well, boxing and fencing, and he created his own.
The old Green Hornet episodes, Bruce Lee's fighting as Kato is all these very short movements that you can't really make out very clearly. And what he's doing is using Wing Chun.
Despite his short career, Bruce Lee's impact popularized Chinese Kung Fu, and more Westerners started to take interest in Chinese martial arts. Once this became evident, many of Grandmaster Yip's students became teachers in their own right, and began to teach Wing Chun to foreigners. And it's from these men that Wing Chun grew and has become a mainstream kung fu system in the West. When people think of kung fu, they tend to think of the Shaolin forms and the long stances popularized in the media. But Wing Chun is very different. The system emphasizes using what's called a short back arrow stance, rather than the long stances. Practitioners are encouraged to get up close and personal to fight. The Wing Chun system utilizes street fighting scenarios, and isn't meant to be trained for sport.
The primary thing that makes it unique is we train for practicality. We don't train for competition. We don't train to fight in the ring or the MMA or the octagon or any of that.
Unlike other systems, Wing Chun is meant to overcome hard with soft. Practitioners are taught to use the momentum of their opponent against them, essentially redirecting their power back at them. For this reason, the system greatly benefits smaller, weaker people who otherwise couldn't overcome a bigger, stronger opponent.
What makes Wing Chun unique is that it was a system that was designed by a woman to defeat older or more experienced or stronger opponents. So basically it's a system that has a mathematical foundation which uses the principle of using less force to defeat a larger opponent.
One of the most famous training methods in Wing Chun is the Chi Sao training method. The Chi Sao exercise is designated to train the practitioners in sensitivity and muscle memory. The minute they connect, they feel the opponent's movements and allow that to help them fight and defeat their opponent.
Chi Sao, or sticky hands, as it's also called, is sort of a training exercise to teach sensitivity in techniques so that you can feel the force from your opponent and figure out where the force is trying to go and how best to cope with it.
That is a tactile reflex drill. So that's a drill that's designed to allow you to start to feel pressure after that initial engagement or that initial contact with your adversary. So I can tell immediately once I make that hand-to-hand or hand-to-body contact where he's pushing, so I can get out of his way and redirect the energy.
Another famous training technique of Wing Chun is the wooden dummy. The wooden dummy is meant to emphasize the use of body power as well as correct footing and hand usage. Once the practitioner has trained long enough and has a good grasp of the forms and freestyle techniques, he then uses the wooden dummy as a way to refine and perfect the usage of angles and positions. The wooden dummy is where the complete empty-handed system of Wing Chun is finished and completed. The practitioner will then begin the next phase of training once the wooden dummy training is done. In modern times, most martial artists like to experiment with different martial arts systems and mix different styles in whenever they spar. With the popularity of the MMA and octagon, many wonder whether Wing Chun can be mixed as well. Usually this depends on the practitioner, whether they feel it can be mixed or not.
There are other martial arts that Wing Chun blends very well with. One of those is Muay Thai. Another is a monkey system. But for example of Muay Thai, which I'm also a practitioner, the movements of Wing Chun, they blend very well because of the foundation, the base that you're using to execute the movements.
But you could theoretically use like karate techniques for sort of long and mid-range attacking and switch to Wing Chun when you get up close. But you could say the same for